What actually has to die inside you before other people's opinions stop running your life? Here's where it starts. The brain doesn't discover who you are, it constructs who you are, moment by moment, from memory, sensation, and social feedback. That construction is fragile by design and deeply social. Wanting approval isn't weakness, it's neurochemistry. The same brain circuits that register physical pain also register social rejection. Seeking belonging isn't vanity, it's a survival system your nervous system inherited long before language existed. From early childhood, the nervous system gets calibrated to a specific audience: parents, teachers, peers. Their reactions become data. Over time, the brain learns to predict approval before acting, and that prediction loop becomes automatic, invisible, and exhausting. Psychologist Scott Barry Kaufman, director of the Center for Human Potential at Columbia University, has argued that when external validation becomes the primary metric for self-worth, the authentic self gets buried beneath layers of performed identity. You become your own audience's favorite character. Here's the misconception worth correcting. Most people assume that stopping to care what others think is a confidence upgrade, a personality setting you switch on. It isn't. It's a loss, and losses have to be grieved before they can become freedom. What dies isn't other people's opinions. What dies is the imagined observer you've been narrating your life for. Psychologists call this the internalized audience, a composite figure assembled from every person whose approval ever mattered. Losing it feels like losing a witness. That loneliness is real, and it's underreported. Freedom from approval doesn't arrive as a flood of confidence. It arrives quietly, often as a hollow feeling. The social scaffolding falls away, and for a time, nothing has replaced it yet. But here's a question worth sitting with. Why do some people make this shift in their 20s, while others never make it at all? The answer isn't intelligence. It isn't willpower. Research points to something more uncomfortable: a specific kind of loss. The shift tends to follow disillusionment. A relationship ends. A career path collapses. An approval that was chased for years finally arrives and feels like nothing. That gap between the promised reward and the actual feeling is the crack where something new can enter. Cognitive behavioral therapy, the practical framework at the center of modern behavioral science, addresses this directly. CBT doesn't tell people to stop caring. It teaches them to examine the narrative running beneath the caring. What story is the approval protecting? What would you be without it? The brain is a prediction machine. Before you speak in a meeting, before you post anything, before you wear something unusual, the brain runs a rapid simulation. How will this land? That simulation is useful. The problem is when it runs constantly, even when no one is watching. Here's the counterintuitive finding. Behavioral science research, much of it drawn from weird populations, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic societies, consistently shows that greater digital connectivity correlates with greater sensitivity to social evaluation, not less. That weird limitation matters. Research on approval seeking and self-concept is heavily weighted toward individualistic cultures. In many collective cultures, the boundary between self and community is drawn differently. Approval isn't a trap to escape, but a form of relational integrity. Humanistic psychology offers a different frame. Rather than treating approval seeking as a malfunction, it treats the movement away from it as a developmental arc. A slow, often painful process of learning to locate value internally, rather than importing it from the outside world. This is the mechanism. The shift doesn't happen because people stop caring about connection. It happens because something else becomes more load-bearing. Values replace audience. The question changes from what will they think to what do I actually believe? And that's a different kind of gravity entirely. Here's the warning. Kaufman's research on transcendence and self-actualization finds that people who adopt purpose as an identity signal rather than as a lived commitment report higher rates of burnout and emotional exhaustion. Performing authenticity is still a performance. The nervous system knows the difference. Here's what nobody names out loud. When you stop performing for an audience you've spent years cultivating, those people sometimes leave. Not dramatically, quietly. The version of you they liked no longer shows up consistently, and the relationship dissolves. That grief isn't a sign the shift was wrong. It's the proof the approval was real and the relationships were real, even if they were conditional. Grieving them honestly is what separates genuine psychological growth from the performance of not caring, which is just another kind of performance. B.F. Skinner's behavior modification research showed that reward patterns, once established, resist extinction with stubborn consistency. The approval loop is no different. Retraining the internal reward system takes time, repetition, and deliberate exposure to acting without external validation, and surviving it. In practice, the shift shows up in small, unremarkable moments. Sending the email without reading it 12 times. Wearing what's comfortable. Disagreeing in a meeting without preparing an apology in advance. None of these are dramatic. All of them are genuinely hard at first. Here's the paradox. A 2019 study by researchers at the University of Waterloo found that people rated as authentic by observers were also rated as measurably more trustworthy and socially attractive, independent of conventional confidence markers. The approval they stopped chasing often followed them anyway, just from different people. The brain never stops constructing the self. That's a core fact of neuroscience. What changes is the raw material. Before the shift, the self is built from reflected appraisals, what others seem to think. After it, the self is built from direct experience, what you actually feel and choose. Neuroscience has validated what humanistic psychologists argued for decades. The biological underpinnings of self-concept are real. The neural pathways that carry social pain are real. But pathways can be reweighted. The nervous system isn't a fixed verdict. It's a living system. One more thing worth naming. The approval loop feels inevitable, hardwired, and permanent. But neuroscience shows that even deeply entrenched reward circuits can be reweighted through repeated new experience. The sensitivity isn't a life sentence. It's a calibration, and calibrations can be adjusted. Structured self-examination, whether through cognitive behavioral therapy, journaling, or courses like the one offered at the University of Sydney, integrating ancient and modern psychological insights, accelerates the shift. Not because the tools are magic, because they create deliberate, repeated contact with your own interior, without an audience present. The implication reaches beyond the individual. A 2021 organizational psychology study published in the Journal of Applied Psychology found that teams where members reported lower approval-seeking behavior showed measurably higher psychological safety scores, meaning individual shifts aggregate into changed group environments. One person opting out recalibrates the room. So back to the opening question. What actually has to die? Not confidence, not connection, not the desire to be seen and known. What dies is the agreement that other people's perception of you is the final word on your value. That agreement was never signed. It was assumed. The loneliness that comes with the shift is real. A transitional ache between two architectures of self. But the relationships that form on the other side are built on the version of you that showed up without preparation. Those relationships tend to be fewer. They also tend to be the ones that hold. The most actionable thing behavioral science offers here isn't a technique, it's a question. The next time you hesitate before acting, before sending, speaking, wearing, choosing, ask, am I waiting for permission or am I waiting for certainty? Those are different problems with very different solutions. What you've always called caring too much about what others think might be something more precise, a nervous system that was never given permission to trust itself. The starting point is small. Take one action today without checking how it lands. Not forever, just once. That's how calibration begins.